one quiet afternoon, when all of Elon Musk's attention was focused on grand technological projects. A surprising question from an elderly woman shook his mind. "Do you believe in God?" This simple yet profound question felt like an odd piece of a puzzle in the world he had built. And from that moment on, Elon found himself not only confronting scientific questions but also beginning to search for answers about himself and the universe that he had never considered before. Before we begin, please leave a comment where you are watching the story. We hope that these meaningful stories will spread everywhere. On a sunny morning at Tech Valley, the atmosphere in the corner cafe was filled with bustling energy. People were immersed in their work and discussions about technology. But Elon Musk, the leader of groundbreaking projects, had a bit of space for himself in this lively world. He was reflecting on new plans for Tesla when a figure entered the cafe, capturing his attention. It was an elderly woman, slender yet strong, like an ancient tree standing firm against the wind. Her silver hair rippled, and her eyes, full of depth, reflected a lifetime of experience and untold stories. She quietly walked toward Elon's table, her gaze never leaving him. It seemed she didn't care about the curious looks of those around her. Elon couldn't help but sense the difference in her gaze. It wasn't the unconscious curiosity of the crowd, but something deeper, as though she knew secrets about him that he had never revealed. She sat down across from him, as gently as a spring breeze. Without needing permission, Elon flinched, unaccustomed to this kind of approach, even though he had been the center of attention for many years. But this time, it was different. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice like a gentle wave lapping against the shore. "I've heard so much about you. You've done wonders, created works that the whole world admires. But I have one question. Do you believe in God?" Her question echoed, like a sound rippling through the air, awakening a dark corner of Elon's mind. He stared at her for a long time, feeling as though a world had just opened up before him. He had once been the kind of person who dared to face immense challenges, from sending humans to Mars to changing the way people lived and moved on Earth. But this question was completely different. He couldn't imagine how he would respond. Mrs. Harper, this elderly woman, with her serene smile and insightful eyes, left him perplexed. Was she challenging him? Or was this a real question, one that he had to face in order to find the truth within himself? Every day, Elon dealt with dozens of scientific, technical problems, and questions about the future of humanity. But now, in front of her, he felt so small. He had always been proud of what he had built, but he had never asked himself about intangible values like faith or the existence of a force beyond it all. He sat still, unsure of what to say. The question not only struck his intellect but also touched his soul, reaching into the hidden corners of himself that he had never allowed anyone to see. In that moment, Elon realized that even though he might conquer the universe, questions about God and faith were far more difficult to solve than any challenge he had ever faced. A sense of discomfort surged within him. He had launched rockets into space, created self-driving cars, but he couldn't find an answer to this question, and that made him feel strange, as if there was something in life he had never truly understood. Mrs. Harper's face remained calm, unhurried, and unforced. Just a glance, a smile, as if she already knew the answer and only needed Elon to find it within himself. Elon took a deep breath, then slowly placed his coffee cup down. He realized that, despite being a person of technology and science, he couldn't ignore the bigger questions of life. Her question wasn't about whether he believed in God or not, but whether he had the courage to face things that couldn't be explained by the mind, by technology. When this conversation ends, will Elon be able to find a new answer to his life? Will he discover that some questions cannot be answered with logic but can only be felt with the heart? In the quiet atmosphere of the corner cafe, Amidst the usual hustle of Tech Valley, Elon Musk sat silently, his eyes deep in thought about the future he was slowly building. The sound of keyboard clicks, casual chatter, and coffee grinders echoed in the air. But to Elon, everything faded as he became absorbed in his ambitious projects. Then, as if time suddenly stopped, a woman entered the cafe. She was tall and graceful, her silver hair shimmering like delicate strands of jewelry. She wasn't in a hurry, not rushing, but her walk carried an astonishing sense of determination. Elon glanced up and immediately sensed the difference in her gaze, a sharp, insightful look, as though she had seen things others couldn't. Unlike the others, she didn't make a fuss, didn't call for attention. She quietly approached Elon's table and sat down across from him, creating a strange silence in the air. Elon couldn't help but feel the stillness in the atmosphere as she smiled and fixed her gaze on him with a patience, as if she already knew that his answer wouldn't come immediately. Her look wasn't the usual curiosity, but a deep observation, as if she had been waiting for a long time to ask this question. Mrs. Harper wasn't in a rush. She simply sat there, her eyes not leaving him, as if waiting for a conversation, not for a simple answer, but for a deep sharing. Finally, after a long pause, Elon gently spoke, his voice calm, but hesitating. "Why do you want to ask me this?" Elon asked, his mind filled with questions that weren't easy to answer. Mrs. Harper softly replied, her voice warm and full of feeling. "Because I believe that everyone, especially people like you, those who are shaping the future of the world, need to face this question. You can change the way we live, but how will you build the world if you don't understand the essence of life itself?" Her words echoed in Elon's mind like a bell. Yes, she was right. But it also felt like a challenge. A challenge not only to face questions about technology but also about things that couldn't be explained by equations or scientific theories. A question that even he, the leader of great innovations, had to face with helplessness. Elon sat still, his mind spinning with thoughts that couldn't be resolved immediately. Could this be the awakening moment he had been searching for? Or was it just a simple question she was challenging him to answer on his own? While everyone else in the cafe continued chatting, the sound of the coffee grinder still hummed steadily. But Elon felt as though everything around him had faded. The tension in the air seemed to grow heavier, and he realized this was a moment that could change everything in his life. But could a question about God really change the life of a person who had lived his entire life with technology and science? Throughout his life, Elon had faced the world's greatest problems. He had solved issues in space, energy, and transportation. But now, before him, was a question that no machine or calculation could explain. In that moment, as Mrs. Harper sat across from him, her gaze gentle, as though she was waiting for an answer he himself hadn't yet found, Elon felt he was at a major crossroads in his life, a choice he had never considered. He had drawn the future of the world, but perhaps it was now time to face his own past. Elon sat motionless in the luxurious armchair, silence enveloping him. But inside, his mind was in turmoil. An indescribable feeling was rising, something he had never been familiar with. He was a person who faced every challenge, a strategist of the future. But today, Mrs. Harper's question made him feel small. The question wasn't about technology or progress, but about faith, a realm where he couldn't find an approach. "Do you believe in God?" she had asked, her voice gentle but piercing like a ray of light through the dark night. This question felt like a measuring stick he couldn't escape. Elon hesitated. This wasn't a question about mathematics, not about sending rockets into space or changing the way humans move. This was a question about existence, about things that couldn't be explained by theories or formulas. In moments like this, his intellect didn't have an easy answer. He had spent so many years of his life attached to things that could be measured. understood, and controlled. But what about faith? How could one understand something that couldn't be seen, couldn't be touched? His mind was spinning, thoughts swirling like a storm in his head. He opened his mouth, but all that came out was silence. How could he speak this out, when even he himself hadn't yet found the answer? "I don't know," he finally uttered, the sound so small that only Mrs. Harper could hear it. It was like a painful admission, something he never thought he would say in many years. A person like him, one of the world's leaders, admitting to not knowing. Could he accept ignorance in a world where everything was supposed to have an answer? Mrs. Harper smiled, but not in a triumphant or judgmental way. Her eyes lit up with deep compassion, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Sometimes, the not knowing is the truest answer," she said, gently like a breeze. "But don't let that stop you from seeking. The journey must continue." Elon listened to her words, and in that moment, it felt like everything around him had brightened. He realized that this journey of seeking wasn't about creating tangible things, but about expanding the soul. It was a journey into questions that weren't easy to answer, into questions about the nature of humanity and things beyond reason. He leaned back, his eyes gazing into the empty space, but his mind filled with thoughts. The images of rockets, electric cars, and space adventures gradually faded, replaced by a new sensation, a feeling that he had to face things that couldn't be measured or explained by technology. These things couldn't be controlled, but they were the most important things in life. Faith, the connection to something larger than oneself, might be a question he had never thought about. But now, it was something he had to face. When his gaze met Mrs. Harper's again, a strange feeling rose within him. There was no pressure, no criticism. She didn't demand that he change or provide a perfect answer. She only encouraged him to face himself, to seek out the big questions that every person must face in their lifetime, whether they were Elon Musk or anyone else. And in that moment, he realized that the journey he was embarking on wasn't a journey to new inventions or discoveries, but a journey to self-discovery. Elon sat quietly, his eyes distant as he looked out the window, where the dark sky stretched like velvet, covering the vast universe. The questions about the universe, about life, about the unsolved mysteries made him feel like he was being sucked into a whirlpool with no escape. He had tried to decipher this world with every tool technology could offer. But for the first time, a strange feeling arose within him. Were all the answers he sought truly out there, in the distant stars? Or were they simply hidden somewhere inside him? In that quiet moment, he suddenly realized that sometimes, not having an answer is part of the journey. The world he had built from technological breakthroughs now seemed pale in comparison to something deeper that he was beginning to feel. In the small space of this cafe, Elon felt he was no longer alone. The surrounding sounds, the clink of cups, the chatter of people, suddenly became faint. His mind seemed to be drawn to a distant place, where there was no technology, no Silicon Valley prominence, but only the unanswered inner questions. Suddenly, a gentle voice from the left interrupted his train of thought. "You don't always need to find all the answers," a middle-aged woman said, her voice warm and deep, yet carrying a strange sense of peace. When Elon turned, she had sat down next to him, her eyes shining with profound understanding, as though she could see through the things he couldn't express in words. "Sometimes, just knowing how to live with the questions is an achievement," she continued, her hand gently placed on his, creating an unexpectedly comforting sensation. Elon felt a warm energy from that touch. Throughout his journey, he had always sought to solve problems, using technology to improve and move forward. But this time, he felt as if he was standing before something that couldn't be measured by any tool. This wasn't about seeking breakthrough inventions or understanding the universe. but about finding a way to connect with himself and the world around him in a completely different way. He looked into her eyes, and although no more words were spoken, her words left a deep mark on his heart. Elon realized that the journey of discovery didn't always need clear answers. Sometimes, living with the questions, seeking deeper values, was the most important thing. As she stood up, walking gracefully with an ethereal presence, she turned once more and looked at him with an understanding gaze that he had never felt before. We are all trying to find something, Elon. Some find it in technology, others in faith. But in the end, what we really want is to find the meaning of life. Elon watched her, her delicate steps gradually fading from sight. But her words still echoed in his mind, like a peaceful wave gradually spreading within him. He stood up, his thoughts still revolving around the big question he couldn't yet find an answer to. The cafe around him seemed to return to its noisy rhythm, but his mind remained calm, as if he was facing a new turning point in his life. As he stepped out of the cafe and blended into the bustling crowd on Main Street, Elon knew he wasn't just walking on the familiar road of technology. He was starting a new journey. A journey not to change the world outside, but to change himself. To explore things that science and technology couldn't touch. To seek answers to deep questions about faith and the meaning of life. Elon walked through the busy streets of Tech Valley, where technology was constantly evolving and changing. But today, his steps seemed weighed down by something he had never felt before. The lights of the modern buildings, the noise of the cars rushing by, all seemed to be a blurry backdrop. Suddenly, a phrase from Mrs. Harper flashed through his mind like an electric current. Everyone is chasing the same thing, meaning. These words repeated in his mind, as if they were endlessly spinning in his head, pushing him into a search he had never thought about. Tech Valley had always been a place where Elon felt alive, where everything was solved with scientific minds, logic, and technology. But now, everything around him seemed faded and distant. The sharp minds of engineers, who always worked hard to push the limits of technology, seemed to be in a different world. He felt as though he was walking in a world he had never fully understood. A world beyond numbers and data. Am I starting to think about something that will change everything I've done? He wondered as he walked, his gaze fixed on the busy stream of cars. Had he ever thought about faith, religion, or spirituality? No. Elon Musk was a man of theory and science, not of mysticism. But after the conversation with Mrs. Harper, it felt as though something had been awakened in him. A new connection he had never known before. Reaching his Tesla, Elon reached for his phone. But his finger hesitated. He briefly wondered whether to open the SpaceX app or what to do next. A thought flashed through his mind, and instead of returning to numbers and data, he opened a web browser. He typed a simple word in the search bar. God. He had never imagined he would walk down this path, seeking answers to questions he had never paid attention to. The results came up with countless articles, ranging from serious to skeptical. But nothing could make him stop. He read every word, every sentence, as though everything was explaining something larger than his own existence. What do people find in their faith? What makes humanity believe in something invisible, beyond the understanding of science? Elon wasn't seeking a quick answer but a deeper understanding of a world he had never considered. He wasn't looking for a simple answer, but an answer for the world. He didn't realize how long he had been lost in these thoughts until the light outside the window began to fade, signaling that the entire day had passed without his noticing. He sighed, closed the laptop, feeling as though a strange calmness had taken over. It wasn't the calm of having found an answer, but the calm of a turning point. He didn't have all the answers yet, but something inside him had shifted. He had found a part of himself he hadn't known existed. As he stood up, the dim light of the street lamps outside the window reminded him that everything around him was still going on. But inside him, There was a subtle change. A change he hadn't fully realized. He didn't know that he was starting a new journey. But this feeling, although not yet fully clear, was something larger than anything he had ever built. That morning, when the gentle light of dawn streamed through the windows of Riverside Manor, Elon felt a distinct change within himself. It wasn't like any change he had ever gone through before. It wasn't about work, nor the great projects he had built, but something deeper, like a new life force was rising within him. This feeling, though vague, was certainly an essential part of his life. Could this be the moment when a new journey begins? A journey Elon had never predicted? He stood still on the vast balcony of the villa, his eyes gazing out over the expansive Tech Valley, where everything he had created until now stood clear. The massive companies, the technological breakthroughs, the rockets that had pierced the sky. Every achievement reflected success. But at this moment, amid that vast space, he felt a loneliness, a smallness he had never known before. It wasn't a failure, but an awakening. He suddenly realized that there were questions he had never asked. Questions that now echoed in his mind. Mrs. Harper's voice still echoed in his head. "We are all searching for our own path." Her words were like a reminder, awakening in him a curiosity about the path he was on, whether it was the right one. And if not work, could he find something else? A greater purpose? A mission he had never considered? He leaned against the railing, his eyes looking far into the distance, where the mountains rose and the fields were lush and green. A new question appeared in his mind. Is it possible to merge two seemingly incompatible elements, technology and faith? Elon Musk, the man who had challenged the limits of space. Could he be the one to create a fusion between science and spiritual values? Could he discover a truth that no one had dared to consider before? A truth that could change the way humanity perceives itself and its place in the universe? He had brought the world closer to groundbreaking inventions like automatic rockets soaring into space and self-driving cars. But this time, he felt a different kind of urge. It wasn't a new invention, but a new search, a journey for a deeper understanding of things that go beyond the limits of reason. Faith cannot be built like a technological product, but it exists, strong and influential. If he could find a way to connect science and faith, he could create a revolutionary change for humanity. As he immersed himself in these thoughts, his phone suddenly buzzed. A new notification from the SpaceX team about a rocket launch. Although this was a routine task, when he looked at the screen, Elon didn't feel the rush. There was no pressure, no sense of urgency weighing him down. A strange calmness flooded his soul. The questions about work, about creation, no longer felt like a priority. Instead, questions about being, about life, about the universe, were taking over his mind. He quickly typed a short message in response to the team. But in his heart, a decision had already formed clearly. He would continue his work, building the successful companies. But now, he knew that the quest for truth, for meaning, would be just as important. It would be a journey not just toward the stars, but also into the essence of existence. Elon Musk was no longer just an inventor. He was a seeker, a man turning toward a world where not only technology, but also faith, understanding, and unanswered questions existed. He didn't know exactly where this would lead him, but he was ready to face whatever came, and only time would reveal what awaited him ahead. As night fell, Elon stood in the vast room of Riverside Manor, his eyes gazing at the twinkling stars in the dark sky. He had everything a person could dream of: power, success, influence. But at this moment, one question had consumed his mind. Had he lost something more important along this long and challenging journey? The scientific achievements, the rockets flying into space, or the self-driving cars were just steps on the continuous path toward progress. But could they help him answer the bigger questions? The questions about the existence of humanity and this universe? Was the truth something he could uncover through technology? Or did it require a different approach? A different path? A different way of approaching things? From conversations with Mrs. Harper to the moments of silence in his own thoughts, Elon began to realize that answers are not always clear. The search is not a destination, but a never-ending journey. And this journey may not just revolve around scientific discoveries, but also self-discovery and the exploration of the intangible values that humanity continues to seek. The next day, Elon stepped out of Riverside Manor. For the first time in many months. Not in a hurry. Not urged by the tasks awaiting him. He walked through the garden, feeling each step touch the earth, as if he were searching for a reconnection with the natural world he had forgotten during all the years of relentless striving. In a miraculous moment, Elon felt a profound understanding. Perhaps, humanity's progress lies not only in scientific achievements, but also in the ability to recognize the invisible connections between humans, the world, and the universe. And it is these connections that hold the key to opening new doors of understanding. That day, as the sunset slowly descended, Elon looked toward the horizon, a sense of peace enveloping him. He no longer worried about having to search for a grand purpose, because he knew that this journey, this search itself, was the true goal. He didn't need to have all the answers immediately. What mattered was that he had found peace in accepting the imperfection of life and the universe. Elon Musk stood there, in the dim light of the sunset, not as an inventor, but as a seeker. The road ahead was unclear, but he knew one thing for sure: every step on this journey would bring him to a new understanding, a deeper connection with the world, and the endless questions that humanity had been searching for over the centuries. And even though the answers to everything were not yet clear, he knew that this journey itself was the greatest answer, bringing peace to his soul and a firm belief in the future. Note: this is a fictional story created for entertainment purposes and to convey meaningful messages about the search, connection, and intangible values in life. The characters and events in the story are not real and do not accurately reflect the lives or journeys of real people. All events and circumstances in the story are products of imagination and are not intended to influence or evaluate any individual or organization. We hope readers understand and empathize.